2015 was a really good year for movies for me, so with that, along with the long and illustrious tradition of film movie buffs having a top 10 year-end review list, I'm going to make my top 10 favorite films of 2015. Now, it's worth noting that this is top favorite, not top best, because, again, these are going to be films that kind of affected me personally the most. It's worth noting, any of these movies, great birthday presents. Again, it was an amazing year for movies, so pretty much anything that I put on this list had to beat out a huge number of things, and it's worth noting that just because something isn't on this list doesn't mean I don't adore it. So let's not waste any time, let's just dive right into my top 10 favorite movies of 2015. Number 10, Dope. I really have very little to say about Dope. It's a surprise little indie film that came out during the middle of blockbuster season. So it's almost a surprise that I even went to see it at all, but I am extremely glad that it did. Dope managed to maintain a lot of fun and a lot of spunk, and it managed to tread this really interesting line of having its protagonists do things that are not necessarily very heroic or generally perceived as protagonistic, and yet they generally still gain our sympathies. And that's a huge part of the point of the movie. It's about kind of mislaying those sympathies and being too quick to judge in situations, and a lot about our perceptions of people and how our preconceived notions of what an action will mean will shape how we perceive people who perform that action. There's a lot of really interesting thematically complex things going on inside of a movie that's this deceptively simple. It's definitely worth a watch. Number 9, The Martian. Everybody loved The Martian this year, and everybody was right. In addition to being hilarious and huge and epic and personal at the same time, which is a great feat for any movie to achieve. The Martian also just happens to be a really touching story about, triumph of the human spirit, which I know is like a cliche thing to say, but honestly, that's what the movie's about. And it's also about going out and making the thing that you want to happen. It's about not giving up in the face of impenetrable extreme odds, which is a common recurring theme through space picks in the last few years, but is one that works. Space is this huge and terrifying thing, and it really grants a way of stacking humans against these insane, insurmountable odds, and this movie happens to do that with not a small amount of humor. It's breathtaking, it's hilarious, it's definitely worth the watch. Number 8, Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is the new movie by Guillermo del Toro set in an ancient Victorian murder mystery almost. It's a ghost story, although the ghosts aren't even really the central point. It's not particularly scary given its marketing, it's more of a drama than anything else, but it achieves amazing things with set design and does incredible things with the aesthetics of it, if nothing else, and manages to tell a chilling and haunting and beautiful story about the sins of the past coming back to haunt you. I really do not know how I can describe this movie to you, just see it. It's gorgeous. Number 7, Goodnight Mommy. Goodnight Mommy is an Austrian independent horror film produced this year, which is just hugely unsettling. I will grant you it's a little slow paced to start out, but it achieves an amazing thing where it just ramps up slowly to the point where it becomes almost difficult to watch the screen. It achieves an amazing kind of intensity with this kind of slow burn approach, and while maybe the twist ending is a bit easy to see coming for some people, I still thought it was really effective, really chilling, definitely worth the watch. Number 6, Room. Room is a drama about a woman and her son who are trapped in a single room to live their entire life by their abductor and the story of their life within it. If that doesn't already hook you in, I don't know what will. It pulls that premise off with exactly the kind of skill and grace that it needs to be pulled off to have the desired emotional effect, and boy howdy it does. It comes out of the situation from a huge number of different angles and has so many things to say about abuse and about moving on and the emotional states of all of it. It's amazing. 5, It Follows. It Follows is another movie that everybody's been talking about this year. It seems that all of a sudden It Follows is everyone's new favorite horror movie, and honestly that's for good reason. It's very deeply unsettling, not in the same way that Goodnight Mommy is, but it's still hugely effective. It's ranking above Goodnight Mommy not because it's scarier, although scarier might be a better term, less unsettling but scarier, but more because it has more interesting things to say. It Follows captures kind of a teenage sexual anxiety and almost perfectly encapsulates the feeling of being nervous and anxious about what happens next in the future. If you are at all a horror fan, you definitely need to see It Follows. Just, God. Number 4, I'll See You in My Dreams. I'll See You in My Dreams is a quiet little indie film about age, death, retirement, and a lot of different things that I personally am not generally close enough to relate to. I mean, there's other themes in there too, obviously, that relate to a more general audience. But for me, it's more effective, not necessarily because the themes apply to me now, but because A, they will someday. B, they provide an interesting perspective that and I'm betting most of you don't get to see that often. And C, it's just deeply, deeply poignant. I felt a lot of emotions at this movie. Everything is played subtly and softly, and it all clicks anyway. It doesn't feel the need to force anything. It just lets them play, and they play perfectly. Number 3, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is the new movie written by Aaron Sorkin, who I am a huge fan of, although I understand that a lot of people aren't, and that's understandable. I think that The Shark Wit is perfect. And I know that a lot of people have dismissed this as being just another Steve Jobs movie, but again, there is no subject matter that cannot be turned into a good movie, and I promise you that they do so here with expert grace. Everything is smart, everything is well written, and there's a lot of poignancy in it. It's such a tightly crafted script. It's such a tightly crafted movie, and it just works. I feel like I just keep saying the same things about these movies over and over, but God, Steve Jobs was so good. I don't know what to say about it to convince you to go. Just see Steve Jobs. Number 2. You guys have been waiting for this one. Magic Mike XXL. So I'm a little bit obsessed with this movie. I mean, this movie is amazing. I've seen it so many times already, and obviously I already own it on DVD. Magic Mike XXL, aside from being the most woman-loving, sex-positive thing you will see this year, or probably over the next few years, it also, and beside from it just feeling like a really great night on the town and being just an enjoyable, gosh darn movie, and aside from it having a really interesting cast of characters who I really got invested in and cared about, it also just fundamentally changed the way that I see sexuality. I mean, Magic Mike XXL is a story essentially about sexuality as a creative expression of the self, which is just not an angle that I've ever really seen before. And it completely changed the way I see sex, basically, entirely, with this one movie. And I full force believe that it changed it for the better. If you have not seen it, I cannot recommend it enough. It's so good, even if you don't like seeing dudes strip for some reason. And before we get to number 1, here are some runners-up. Go ahead and yell at me for your favorite not making the list. And finally, number 1. We all knew this was coming, didn't we? I mean, Inside Out is not a perfect film. I didn't think that Bing Bong worked particularly well, for example, but Inside Out, I mean, it's Pixar. Of course they were going to do well. It made me cry because of course it did. It made me rethink my entire life because of course it did. It was poignant. It was profound. A lot of people have been seeing this movie as an argument for why sadness is important, and that's certainly true, but it's also a lot more complex than that. I mean, I see Inside Out also as being somewhat about depression. It's about adolescence and growing up and emotional maturity, and I think more than any of that, really, Inside Out is about emotional complexity. It's about having more than one emotion affect you at the same time and combining those to form new experiences, which is not the way that we usually talk about emotions. Inside Out is trying to change the way that we have conversations about emotions to begin with, and that's just the most profoundly valuable thing that I think any movie this year has done so far. Inside Out's my favorite movie of the year. So that is my list. I usually don't ask people for comments, but I'm actually genuinely curious with this one. So like, leave a comment with your top movie list. Maybe if you didn't see 10, like what were your top ones and why? I'm curious. I love talking about movies. Let's join the conversation about this. Talk about me with these movies anytime, by the way, at any point. I loved Yes, in response to anyone from the future arguing with me about this video being more than 5 minutes, it's because I didn't do one for Christmas, so I felt like I could make this one 10 minutes long.